Nigeria records 322 COVID-19 new cases. Lagos State Health Commissioner tests positive for the coronavirus. In international news, Belarus' unrelenting protesters stormed the streets of the capital, Minsk, demanding the ouster of President Alexander Lukashenko. And in sport, ailing Nigerian coaches to get NFF relief funds.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Nigeria has recorded 322 new COVID-19 cases on Sunday, bringing the total tally to 52,227. The death toll has also increased to 1,002. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control says the new cases were recorded in 17 states and the Federal Capital Territory. The center says 5 new deaths were recorded as a result of complications from the virus. It also says 171 persons across the country have recovered and have been discharged. As usual, Lagos had the largest number of cases at 130. Bauchi had 36 and the Federal Capital Territory reported 25. Meanwhile, Lagos State Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, has tested positive for coronavirus. This was announced on Twitter by the State Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Benga Omotosho, earlier today. Omotosho said Professor Abayomi's positive status was detected during required testing protocol of contact tracing procedures since he has been in close contact with persons who have tested positive for the virus. He said the health commissioner is doing well and has shown no symptoms. As a result of his positive status, the commissioner will be on a 14-day home isolation. The tweet also says the commissioner will continue to discharge his duties as Deputy Incident Commander of the Incident Command Center, a system for COVID-19. He will also function in his role as the Commissioner for Health. The Academic Staff Union of Universities says it will continue its ongoing strike action until the federal government accedes to his demands. Union President Biodo Ogunyemi made the vow during an interactive meeting with critical stakeholders in Port Harcourt over the weekend. Ogunyemi said lecturers today are still being paid on 2009 salary schemes. He says this must be addressed before the union would agree to suspend its strike. The union president said the salary issues are still not fully addressed. He suggested that some government forces have decided to cause suffering for ASUU members by withholding their salaries. He said a 2009 agreement with the government had called for salary review every 3 years. He said that has not been done. Concerns are being raised about the practicality of plans to restart Nigeria's Premier Football League championships in light of prevailing COVID-19 pandemic and the league's weak financial basis, especially as broadcast sponsors have dropped out. Will they again go back to government for a bailout? Correspondent Deji Badmus reports.
The stadium is a home ground of one of the football clubs in the Nigerian Premier League. The last time it hosted a football game was back in March this year, 18th of March to be precise. 2 days after that football game, the stadium was shut down, and since then, no one has been allowed access here. It's the same story for all the stadia across this country at the moment. Football authorities in the country are now hoping to restart the league by early October at the latest. But some analysts say that could be a tough call to make.
The Premier League does not have a broadcast sponsor. Most of their sponsors are pulling out. They are struggling. In fact, I heard on authority that the outgone league, the outgone season was footed by the government. That it was the government that had to give like a loan for them to start the league. So now, how often will you be going to the government to ask for money?
The ultimate decision on the resumption of the league rests squarely with the government, in particular the country's COVID-19 task force, which has ruled out the resumption of contact sports for now. The last time the task force had something to say about football activities in the country, he didn't hold out much hope for the resumption of the league anytime soon. But beyond playing without the crowd, there are also questions as to whether the football clubs in the country, which are mainly government-owned, can afford to pay for the weekly COVID-19 test that will be required for both players and staff.
According to the government, the amount to test one player is almost like 50,000 naira. And I don't know where they will cough that out, especially for clubs that are still complaining that there is no money. Some of them are still owing players.
What I will advise is that the league they can adopt an abridged league, whereby, like the UEFA is doing now, having all the 8 qualifiers for the quarterfinals of their competition grouped in a place, and then you play a mini league. You get the players isolated. Each team has its own dedicated hotel, and they don't have contact with any other person other than member of their squad. So that is what I expect the Nigerian Football Federation or the LMC to be thinking about.
For now, everyone is waiting on the government to decide. But for a player like Anthony Omaka, who plays for one of the country's Premier League clubs, almost 5 months without football has dealt a massive psychological and financial blow.
No player on earth in this whole wide world that exists, this pandemic issue will go to this length. We never believe and we never expected that we'll be at home to this extent. But everybody knows what is going on in the world right now, so we just have to adapt to what is going on in the country right now. I miss football so much, but what can we do? Just as I said earlier, because of what is happening in the world now.
The government would have to make up its mind on the issue and do so quickly, as there are fears that not restarting the league by the first week of October could make it difficult for football authorities to determine teams for continental competitions and affect the general standard of football in the country. It's difficult to tell when football will resume in this country, but when it does resume eventually, it's very unsettling that football fans will be allowed at the stands here.
Coming up, African stories. Saga of Nigerian store closures continue in Ghana as more than 100 shops shuttered. And later, international news. Belarus' unrelenting protesters stormed the streets of the capital, demanding the ouster of President Alexander Lukashenko.
You are watching ANN. Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you'll need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, African News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. The African Union has launched a flagship campaign to intensify the continental fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. The campaign is designed to protect African economies and livelihoods amid the easing of lockdowns. Correspondent Girum Chala has the story.
The campaign Africa Against COVID-19, Saving Lives, Economies and Livelihoods has been much anticipated. The African Union campaign was jointly launched by the Commission for Social Affairs, the Commission for Infrastructure and Energy, and the Africa CDC.
Saving lives, economies, and livelihoods aims to utilize innovative tools, methods, and partnerships with the private sector to develop harmonized strategies aimed at preventing transmission, death, and social and economic harm on the continent. I think this campaign, we are not alone in this campaign, we are together.
The campaign aims to involve the private sector as much as possible.
Our countries and our companies and our carriers should start rethinking the processes, rethinking the way we do business to make sure that our systems are more adopting digitalization, that we are using more contactless or touchless means of providing services.
To 55 billion for
The head of the Africa CDC, John Nkengasong, noted the mounting impact of COVID-19 across Africa.
We are at a very different phase of our pandemic. We have crossed the 1.1 million mark, and countries are easing the lockdown. And as Commissioner Amani said, the loss of economic loss just for travel is about 8 billion and about 50 to 55 billion for tourism on the continent alone. So at this point, we needed to devise a strategy that will protect both travel and borders, protect economies and businesses, and protect schools.
The African Union has launched a number of initiatives to combat the pandemic. For instance, the Africa COVID-19 Response Fund, which pools a resource for anti-epidemic supplies.
There is contributions from member states, there is contributions from our development partners, and the fund is playing a very big role in purchasing the medical equipment needed in our member states.
For most African countries, the worst when it comes to the COVID-19 impacts is yet to come. Many nations still remain underprepared, populations undertasked, and the campaign efforts underfunded. Both Africa CDC and WHO advise African governments to step up their efforts and do it fast.
The saga of Nigerian shop closures in Ghana has been festering for some time now, with more than 100 Nigerian-owned shops closed by authorities. The government says it is enforcing a trade rule that requires foreign shop owners to invest $1 million before engaging in trade. Correspondent Nabil Ahmed Rafai has the details.
A clampdown on foreign-owned retail businesses in Accra's commercial hub. The government says it is enforcing the law that bars foreigners from retail trade by locking up shops. It's particularly affecting Nigerian traders. Local traders are accusing Nigerians of destroying the local market, but the Nigerian retailers disagree. This protest at the Nigerian High Commission in Ghana is a call to the Nigerian government to help resolve the trade dispute.
We just feel that it's so draconian, it's so harsh, and it is punitive in nature, the way we say it. And we feel that Ghana and Nigeria, looking at our past history, that brotherliness, we need to sit down and look at it and see how we can coexist, how these laws can be, even if it's not rectified, it's not put aside, or if there could be some little concession that will give room for Nigerian businesses to operate.
Ghana's law requires that foreigners invest $1 million in their business before engaging in retail trade, something the Nigerian traders want reviewed. In this commercial hub, some people prefer to deal with Nigerian traders because their goods are often cheaper. Tension between local and Nigerian traders operating within the retail space has been simmering for a couple of years. But as it never got resolved, the situation has worsened this year as the government tries to make things right. Ghana is hosting the Secretariat of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that it's hoped will open the market for 1.2 billion people on the continent. However, diplomatic relations with Africa's largest economy, Nigeria, has been strained after a building under construction at the residence of the Nigerian High Commissioner in Accra was demolished in June. Experts say the trade dispute could affect the implementation of the trade agreement.
The government has established a committee on retail trade for foreigners, and that committee has again a plan of action that is being implemented to guide us in terms of our trading relationships with other countries. As part of the AFCFTA mechanism, it goes beyond our trading with our neighbors in ECOWAS. This is intra-African trade. And so the same kind of mechanisms will be developed to allow the free flow of goods between Ghana and other countries.
The Nigerian government says it will take the case to the ECOWAS court if negotiation with the Ghanaian government for reopening of the shops fails, in the hope of unlocking this trade dispute.
Moroccan authorities have rejected any normalization of relations with Israel. Prime Minister Said Din El Othmani said on Sunday, Morocco will not go into any normalization with a country it's called the Zionist entity. It says that would embolden it to go further in breaching the rights of the Palestinian people. His remarks came ahead of a visit to the region by Jared Kushner, a senior advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump, after the UAE and Israel struck a deal to normalize ties. Morocco and Israel began low-level ties in 1993 after an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal was reached. But Rabat suspended relations with a Jewish state after the outbreak of a Palestinian uprising in 2000. When we return, international news. Belarus' unrelenting protesters stormed the streets of the capital, demanding the ouster of President Alexander Lukashenko. And later, sport. Ailing Nigerian coaches to get NFF relief funds.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. The pressure is mounting on Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who has been defiant against the massive protesters demanding his resignation. Sunday made it the 15th day of the largest and most determined protest ever in Belarus, when a crowd of about 200,000 that defied warnings rallied on Sunday against Lukashenko in a square in the capital Minsk. Lukashenko has also demonstrated his hardened in his stance by brandishing an assault rifle as he moves around. Earlier this month, 7,000 persons were arrested, including 2 members of the Belarusian Opposition's Coordination Council, Olga Volkova and Sergei Dulesky. Officials say Lukashenko, who has been in power since 1994, won more than 80% of the vote to claim a 6th term in office. Opponents claim the ballot was rigged. And 10 persons have been killed and several others wounded after 2 explosions, including one reportedly carried out by a female suicide bomber, struck the southern Philippine town of Jolo. Philippine Red Cross Chief Richard Gordon confirmed the explosion hit at noon on Monday in the capital of Sulu, one of the country's southernmost provinces and a popular stronghold of the Abu Sayyaf group, an armed group that has allied itself with ISIL. Gordon, who is also a senator, said a motorcycle loaded with improvised explosive device went off near a military truck. The Red Cross office in Jolo is located near the site of the blast. 5 soldiers and 4 civilians were killed in the first explosion. Major General Coleto Windua says a second explosion went off just as officers were condoning off the area. The explosive, detonated by a female suicide bomber, killed 1 person. At least 24 government troops were injured in the 2 attacks. The UK's Heathrow Airport has a new directive that all arrivals will compulsorily undergo a COVID-19 test as against being quarantined. The move is also expected to open up flights to key trading partners like the US, Canada and Singapore. Awid Jabakil reports.
Before COVID, a plane used to land or take off from Heathrow every 45 seconds. But Europe's busiest airport is looking a lot emptier these days. Few industries have been as hard hit as aviation, but now officials here are hoping a new testing facility will bring people back. Passengers arriving at Heathrow can take a quick 90-second test to determine whether they have the virus.
It's important because right now UK tourism is being badly affected by quarantine, and a number of countries are subject to quarantine, the red countries, and they're some of the most important routes in UK tourism and in fact UK business, the transatlantic routes with the US, the tourism routes with Spain and France, for example.
More than 30 countries around the world have a testing system on arrival, including global travel hubs like Paris, Tokyo and Dubai. Here in the UK, though, the government isn't rolling it out. Instead, it's telling people to quarantine for 14 days if they travel to high-risk countries. There's also the question of who pays for this. At the moment, passengers will have to foot the bill at roughly $200.
We've had very strong support from airlines around the world, obviously the big UK airlines, as well as Middle Eastern airlines like Emirates, for example, who rely heavily on the routes into London. And just on the cost, I think there's a balance to be had. Many people can't afford to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. They have jobs to go to. They have lives that need to be led.
The facility can currently test up to 13,000 people a day, but those behind it say it could be easily ramped up to the hundreds of thousands.
International travel is feeling the full force of the pandemic, but COVID-19 looks like it's here to stay. And although passengers may be wary of getting on a plane, London's Heathrow Airport is hoping this test will reassure visitors that coming here is safe. That could help the economy and possibly save jobs.
And even the current COVID-19 crisis in Brazil has not dented President Jair Bolsonaro's approval ratings. The president has faced intense criticism for rejecting social distancing and lockdowns to curb the pandemic. But surprisingly, his citizens still approve of his job performance. Respondent Paulo Cabra has more.
Cida Oliveira used to work as housemaid for an elderly couple, but after social distancing measures were put in place to fight COVID-19 in March, she lost her job and the salary she needed to make a living for herself and her 3 children. The monthly government emergency aid of R$600, about $107, was a lifeline for which she thanks President Jair Bolsonaro.
Ajudou bastante, sabe? Porque se não fosse isso,
it was a big help. If it was not for the emergency aid, we'll be desperate. And when somebody does something right, we have to recognize it and praise it. It's not all about criticizing. So when we have elections in the future, people have to recognize what Bolsonaro has done.
For many poor Brazilians, the government's emergency aid is actually more than their usual wages. For them, this money is a welcome relief to the economic crisis that was already here before the pandemic.
The aid, dubbed Corona Voucher, paid to more than 65 million people, has been largely credited by analysts for the significant increase in the president's approval rating, particularly among Brazil's poorest and in strongholds of former leftist President Lula da Silva. According to pollster Datafolha, Bolsonaro reached his highest rating since the beginning of his government, with 37% approval this month.
This is an important source of his support now, like it happened to Lula before. But it's a different situation, because in the case of Lula, it was a permanent program, that is Bolsa Família or family grant. And now what we have, it's an emergential support. And so we don't know if this kind of support will remain for the future.
But the São Paulo state deputy who supports Bolsonaro says Brazilians are now seeing the president was right to go against governors and the mayors who told people to stop working and stay home.
The COVID-19 pandemic was something that no one actually knew anything about, in Brazil or abroad. So, President Bolsonaro was right not to speed headlong into action, as most mayors and governors have done.
Bolsonaro was heavily criticized in Brazil and abroad for his opposition to social distancing measures to fight COVID-19 and his denial of the disease's severity. This latest survey, however, suggests maybe he was right, if not when it comes to public health, at least from the standpoint of political popularity.
Up next, sports. ailing Nigerian coaches to get NFF relief funds. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. President of the Nigeria Football Coaches Association, Ladan Boso, has confirmed all sick Nigerian coaches will benefit from NFF relief funds. Kadira Ikana, Charles Bassi, and Christian Chuku are some of the top coaches presently sick and could be helped by these funds. The Coaches Association is expected to receive 19 million naira from FIFA's funds redistribution through the NFF. FIFA has extended by 90 days the provisional ban on the president of Haiti's Football Association, that's Jean Bart, pending an investigation into allegations he sexually abused teenage girls for 5 years at the National Training Center outside the capital, Port-au-Prince. FIFA says its investigatory chamber has expanded investigations by opening formal proceedings against Nella Joseph, the girls supervisor at the city's National Technical Center, and Wilna Etienne, the federation's technical director. Both Joseph and Etienne have also been banned from taking part in any football activity at both national and international levels for 90 days. Jean Bart has led the country's football federation for 2 decades. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.